So to assess supports, we had respondents rate the helpfulness of a series of supports on a 3-point scale, as you see below. We also had respondents indicate the significance of various obstacles in regards to technology use, also on a 3-point scale, as you see here below. So let's talk a little bit about the findings from this study now. For faculty, the gender breakdown was as follows. We had 48% females take the survey and 52% males took the survey. This was slightly biased towards females. That is to say that it wasn't exactly representative of campus in regards to gender. So we went ahead and tested to see if the opinions of the female participants were biasing the results, and we found that there was no gender bias. So there was an average of 3.6 for faculty in terms of the number of classes that they taught per academic year. And you can see here also that our faculty respondents had considerable teaching experience. Over 30% had 25 years of experience or more. For TAs and students, the gender breakdown was 55% female and 45% male. A similar mean in terms of courses taught per academic year at 3.4. Additionally, our TAs had a lot of teaching experience. 23% had 5 or more years of teaching experience. For students, we had considerable more females take the survey at 63% compared with males, and this is not representative of campus. So using the same method discussed earlier with faculty, we tested to see if the responses of females were biasing the results, and we found no gender bias here as well. So this next figure shows, our findings in terms of the self-rated expertise scale that we talked about earlier. On the x-axis there on the bottom, you see the 5 points on the scale. 1 and 2, remember, were beginner, 3 intermediate, and 4 and 5 expert. And this is remarkable. We see that TAs, faculty, and students all had the same mean. It was a 3.3 on the 5-point scale, and a similar standard deviation as well. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Cara.
I'm going to start by talking about some of the general patterns we saw in the obstacles data from our surveys. The most important general pattern we saw is that technology itself, whether in terms of access to technology or the infrastructure we have available on campus, did not tend to be the most significant obstacle that our users faced. Instead, people rated lack of time or lack of knowledge as more significant, and this pattern was even more pronounced when we look at our expertise data. So I'm going to start by listing out the 3 greatest obstacles that we saw in the faculty survey. The first was lack of time on how to use the technology, and this is an obstacle that had a mean of 2.6 on our 3-point scale, with 3.0 being a major obstacle. So you can see that this was a very significant obstacle for faculty. The next obstacle also involved lack of time, and that is to maintain and monitor the technology once they have it set up and running. The third involved lack of knowledge on how to use the technology to achieve my goals. And this is going to be a very important item when I get into some of our expertise comparisons a little bit later. Looking at the top 3 obstacles for TAs, you see a very similar pattern. The top 2 are the same as for faculty, although the lack of time to learn a technology was rated a little bit lower for TAs with a mean of 2.3. The third highest obstacle for TAs was poorly functioning technology in their teaching environment. And since TAs tend to teach in some of our less equipped classrooms, this pattern is not surprising. Going on to obstacles for students, the top obstacle, again, lack of time to learn how to use the technology. This is consistent across the 3 surveys, although for students this item had a mean of 2.0. Students rated all of our obstacles less severe than faculty or TAs did. The next obstacle for students that was important to look at is lack of adequate training on technology required for coursework. One thing we learned in focus groups is that a lot of students first encounter academic technologies or academic applications of technologies they may have used before in their courses and have to learn some new skills in how to use technology in these settings. They may not have used online discussion boards or online surveys, for instance, in the ways they're being asked to in their courses. The third obstacle for students, inability of my instructor to use the technology well. Now I'm going to look at some of the items where we saw very significant differences based on expertise. The first item I want to look at is lack of knowledge about how to use technology to achieve my goals, and specifically here I'm calling attention to the faculty and TA data. And you can see a very pronounced pattern where this obstacle is more severe for beginners than for experts. This is the largest gap on any item that we saw between beginners and expert users, with faculty who rated themselves as beginners having a mean of 2.54 for this item, compared to experts who had a mean of 1.76. The next item I want to look at is lack of time to learn how to use the technology. And you'll recall this was our most significant obstacle, most severe obstacle for all 3 populations. And here, looking again at the faculty and TA data, you see a very similar pattern to what I pointed out before on the last slide, where beginners rate this obstacle as more significant than experts do, although this is still a pronounced obstacle for all 3 expertise ranges. When you look at faculty here, you see a mean of 2.75, the same mean for TAs at the beginner level, and major obstacle is a 3.0 on this scale. Next, I want to look at lack of timely support for a technical problem. Now, this is an item that was not rated as severe an obstacle as the last 2 I mentioned. Here you can see that even for the group that rated this as the most significant, faculty at the beginner level, there's a mean of 1.99. So this isn't in the same league as lack of time or lack of knowledge, as I pointed out earlier, but you still see a very similar pattern here where beginners are more likely to rate this obstacle higher than our experts. Looking now at lack of knowledge about where to go to learn to use the technology, we get some of the student data in the mix here along with TAs. And again, a very similar pattern. This is not one of the most significantly rated obstacles on our survey, but again, you see beginner users having more of an issue with where to go to learn technology than do experts. Experts, looking at students here, experts rated this at a 1.5 on our scale, in between not an obstacle and minor obstacle, compared to 1.82 for beginners.